I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and picture this. It's London in 1977. You are standing in front of an unremarkable two-story home. Nothing special. Nothing particularly creepy either, but this home has a secret, a dark secret that lies dormant in its walls like an animal waiting to strike. For the new owners, the Hodgson family, they have no idea what horrors await them once they open that door and make themselves at home. This is the true story of the Enfield poltergeist haunting, one of the most documented and terrifying hauntings in history. In the beginning, it looked like just another normal suburban home. Sure, there were some strange drafts and sounds here and there, but that's to be expected when you live in an old house. There was even a friendly ghost that made regular appearances, shaking beds and saying hello. For the Hodgson family, it was just a quirky part of living in an old house. They didn't think much of it. But soon, the innocent ghost would grow claws and teeth and turn into a malicious poltergeist, tormenting the Hodgson family for over a year and a half. It all started when the Hodgsons moved in. That's right. The very presence of the new owners triggered the evil lurking in the house, and they had no idea. The drama began on Christmas Eve. Mrs. Hodgson was decorating the living room tree while her daughters, 11-year-old Janet and 10-year-old Margaret, were playing with a Ouija board. Soon, Margaret began laughing hysterically, screaming that the planchette, the thing you move around the board with, was moving by itself. Then, suddenly, without warning, the girl's wardrobe, which had been pushed against the wall, slid across the room by itself and crashed to the ground. Mrs. Hodges went over to push it back where it belonged, but the wardrobe shot forward and slammed into her, nearly knocking her down. And that's when she realized something was seriously wrong. The next morning, Mrs. Hodges told her husband about what had happened, but he just laughed it off. After all, how could a wardrobe just move by itself? He put it down to faulty eyesight, but that evening, the wardrobe moved again. Mr. Hodges watched in disbelief as it slid across the room towards his wife and daughters. He was scared, but so was Janet. "Get out!" she cried, screaming for her mother. The wardrobe stopped dead in its tracks. Then something incredible happened. It began to shake violently, rattling the room like an earthquake. Then, incredibly, it began to move backward, inching towards the corner of the room. Afterwards, it sat motionless, silent, like nothing had happened at all. Was it a trick of the light? An earthquake? No, because soon the wardrobe moved again, this time colliding with a chest of drawers. And it kept moving until the chest of drawers fell over. Mrs. Hodges was shocked. She couldn't explain it. It was as if an invisible force was trying to push the furniture into the corner of the room. At first, the activity was limited to the wardrobe and the furniture, but soon it spread to other parts of the house. Loud knocks echoed through the walls. Toys flew across the room. Sometimes at night, Mrs. Hodgson would wake up to find scratches on her face or neck. She didn't even sleep with a knife or a fork at the bedside table, but somehow each morning she would wake up to find cuts on her skin. Then there was the whispering. At night, in the darkness, she would hear whispers drifting past her ear. She couldn't make out the words, only the tone. It was sinister, evil. And then, worst of all, there was Janet. She began to change. Her body twisted at night in unnatural ways. Her fingers would curl into claws. Her fingernails would break and bleed. And one night, Mrs. Hodges woke up to find her daughter's entire body covered in bruises and scratches. But the most disturbing thing was her voice. It deepened into a low growl, not her own. One night, Mrs. Hodgson woke up to find herself shaking in fear. And as she looked over at her daughter, she heard a voice speak through Janet's lips. "Why don't you get out?" Mrs. Hodgson screamed in terror. Then the voice continued, "This is my house. Get out." It was clear that whatever was haunting the Hodgsons was not a spirit, but something darker, a demon, and it wanted the family gone. Mrs. Hodgson knew she had to do something, so she called the police. That night, an officer stayed over to watch the house for paranormal activity. And they got more than they bargained for. As the night wore on, objects began to move, shaking the house. And when the officer walked through the house to check for intruders, she swears she saw a chair move across the floor on its own. As she reached out to touch it, it vanished. By the end of the night, she had seen enough. The house was clearly haunted, but by what? As the weeks passed, things only got worse. One night, the local priest was called in to bless the house and perform an exorcism. But as he prayed over Janet, something incredible happened. She began to levitate, floating in mid-air inches above the bed. In terror, she screamed for help, but no one could reach her. She was stuck between earth and sky, thrashing around until the priest ran out of the room, convinced that the demon had taken hold of the girl. Soon, the haunting made headlines. Journalists and investigators from all over the country came to see for themselves. And many of them witnessed Janet floating in her bed, screaming in terror. She was helpless, trapped in her own room as dark figures moved around her. Many investigators believe these were demons, but others believe they were spirits of children who had died in the house long ago. All we know is that they watched and tormented the Hodgson family for over a year and a half. On one occasion, the author of a local newspaper was sitting in a car outside the house with an officer when suddenly a large object shot through the window. Startled, the author ducked as the window shattered above him. But when he looked up, he saw nothing. The officer in the car with him, however, saw something and he wasn't afraid to speak up. "Good God," he said, "I thought I saw a black shadow shoot through the window." Later, another investigator recorded the sound of heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. Then, heavy footsteps coming down the stairs followed by a loud crash. Another time, a journalist was examining the house for clues when he felt something brush against his leg. He turned and saw a black shadow darting around the corner. Another time, a photographer set up his tripod in the backyard and snapped a few photos when suddenly a rock was thrown at his head. It struck him on the arm and cut into his flesh. He needed stitches. Every day, the family grew weaker. Mrs. Hodges became so exhausted from fighting the constant onslaught of activity that she developed ulcers. The haunting was taking over their lives. Then finally, after 18 long months, the Hodgsons packed their belongings and fled. They left everything behind and never looked back. Today, the house still stands empty, silent, watching. Those who pass by at night swear they can still hear Janet's screams echoing from inside. So, why did this happen? What dark secret was hidden in the walls? We may never know. But what we do know is that the Hodgson family was not the first to experience demonic activity in the home. One former resident, Helen Acton Smith, was interviewed about her experiences in the house. According to Helen, the house was filled with demonic energy. One day she was ironing when she heard footsteps in the attic above her head. She dropped her iron in shock as she watched a rocking horse move across the attic floor on its own. Then out of the corner of her eye, she saw a pair of legs walking down the stairs. Another time, she was reading in bed when a book flew through the air and landed on her chest. Then, as she sat there in shock, she felt a cold hand brush across her neck. Another time, she was sitting in the kitchen when a plate flew through the air and hit her in the head. Then, as she lay on the floor in pain, she saw the silhouette of a girl in a Victorian nightgown walking through the wall. And last but not least, she saw the ghost of a man who died in the house in 1923. He appeared to her in a vision and warned her not to move into the house. But Helen ignored his warnings. She moved in anyway. So what exactly is going on here? Is it possible for a house to be haunted by multiple ghosts and demons? And if so, why? Well, according to paranormal experts, this is not unusual. Houses can hold memories, both good and bad, and sometimes those memories refuse to let go. In this case, there are at least 3 ghosts that make regular appearances. There's the man in the Victorian nightgown, the little girl in the nightgown, and the man who died in 1923. These spirits have been trapped in the house for decades, and they won't rest until someone releases them. But there's also another explanation, one that's even scarier. What if this isn't a haunted house? What if the spirits and ghosts are real, not figments of our imagination? And what if they're not ghosts at all, but demons? Demons that feed on human emotions, especially fear. They sense weakness and they attack. That's why the haunting got worse when the Hodgsons moved in. They opened their home to spirits and demons, and they never stood a chance. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.